Back at the beginning of the video series, we cut the decorative paper for each of our buildings, or at least most of our buildings. And then when we cut out the niche openings, we also cut out an opening in one of the panels. These papers have been sized so that we will have a 1/16 inch reveal of that cardstock around each side. And some of them may need some fine tuning in order to have that reveal. Here, if I can get this in the camera right, I've got a good reveal all around the niche, and left and right should always be very good. But here it's a little bit tall, so I'm just going to trim off that 1/16 of an inch or whatever it takes to go and fit, so I'll have a nice reveal up there at the top. So here's my niche panel once it's been trimmed, and I have a nice reveal all the way around. The amount that you may need to trim off will vary from building to building. Buildings 1 and 6 are an extra 1/16 of an inch taller because of adding the patio or the reindeer yard, so you may not need to trim as much off the top and the bottom of the left and right sides. On the center side, if you want to have that reveal, you'll probably have to trim off a little bit more. And so it becomes important to keep track of which side of the building the panel is going to go on. So, for instance, once I trim this center, I'll take a little post-it note and put on there that it is the center panel. And if I mark the center panel, and I also put a post-it tab on the left panel, I don't feel necessary to put a sticker on the right side because it's the only side left. But if it makes you feel more comfortable to put a little post-it tab on each one, you can go ahead and do that. Now, the reason I'm using post-it tabs and not just writing on the back is that when we go to put the windows and doors on, we'll want to know from the front side which side we're working on. So here are my panels for building 1. I've marked the left and center, and I know this one is the right side because it's not marked, and I'll just put them back in my baggie. For most buildings, you should find that the niche opening is just the right size. That's because when we cut this even with the chipboard panel, the chipboard panel size got increased by about 1/16 of an inch all around when we added the box inside. And also left to right, it should be the right size. And it's just the top and bottom that may need to be trimmed off. Usually they need a 1/16 of an inch off the top and the bottom. And that's what you'll always want to do, is trim the top and the bottom for the niche side. Now, if the paper does not have a pattern that you're trying to match, like a plaid, for the other sides you can just move. Instead of having to trim both the top and the bottom, you can slide the top down if it's got a gable so that you get the reveal that you want, and then just trim off the bottom. So here I've fine-tuned the paper for building 3. I've only marked the left panel. The center panel is obvious, and the right panel is the panel that's not marked. So I'll just proceed like that, fine-tuning the paper for the rest of the buildings. You probably noticed we skipped building 2 because we have not cut the paper yet. And I will show you something special about building 5. This is building 5. And the one thing that's different about building 5, you may recall when we constructed this niche that the floor and the ceiling and the sides are inset so that we didn't add an extra 1/16 of an inch to the dimensions. So if I pick up this side, you will see that it is coming right to the edges of the niche. So this is the exception where we need to trim a 1/16 of an inch off of the edges of the niche, the floor, the side, and the ceiling in order to get that reveal. We'll of course have to trim our top and bottom as well, but this is the only building where we need to do a little trimming around the niche in order to see the reveal. To join our buildings together, we will be using Tyvek. And in the cutting guide on this same sheet that we've been using for a lot of reference, there's a Tyvek cutting guide down here at the bottom. And it lists the pieces that we'll need and the sizes. So just go ahead and cut your Tyvek to those sizes. Now that we have all of our Tyvek pieces cut, we need to do a little inking on them. And for all of them, we will ink for about ½ an inch or so right down the middle of the strip, and then on the top and the bottom. And then you'll want to do it on both sides because it doesn't go all the way through. And then for the strip for building 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, we'll continue this inking off to one side. Here's an example where we're continuing off to one side. These buildings, when they join, this strip goes right up against, comes close to the niche opening, so we want to make sure that it is colored with our ink, so if any of it peeks out, it won't be noticeable. So go ahead and prep all of your strips with inking. After the ink is dry, you can prep on just one side with a strip of, if you have ½ inch score tape, use that. Come right up to the edge because you want to have a 3/16 inch channel here in the middle. Now if you don't have ½ inch score tape, you can use 1/4 inch, just use 2 strips on each side. Make sure you get them tied up against each other so that you can maintain a 3/16 inch channel in the middle. So I have all my Tyvek strips prepped. I also have my 2 shims here. This is my wider one. It's about 1.25 inches wide. And this is my 3-inch one. We'll need the smaller one to begin with. And then we'll start by joining buildings 2 and 3. So this is my strip that is 5 3/4 that has inking that goes all the way to one edge. And I'll get out buildings 2 and 3. So here are buildings 2 and building 3. And building 2 is the same on all sides, so it doesn't matter which side you put down. And building 3 has its niche face up. Now this join is going to go across here. And that is why we colored this edge all the way to the edge, because it's going to come up and come onto this niche side, but we'll hold it back a 1/16 of an inch from that edge, from the edge of that niche when we put it on. So I'm just lining it up to see where I'm going to go, and down here at the bottom, I'm just holding it up, a 1/16 of an inch or so, just so it's not going to drag on the bottom. And I'm just going to remove the score tape backing from this side that has ink on it and install it so that I'm holding it that 1/16 of an inch back from that edge. And you should see, if you flip this around, you should see the blue inking here. Once I have my Tyvek attached to building 3, I can remove the score tape backing from this side and just kind of keeping it out of the way for a minute. I'm going to put the shim here and then stand this up. And I have the shim even with the, if it's too short, just have it even with this front edge where we're making the join. You don't want to put too much pressure on there. just enough so that the shim is in there and the buildings are staying straight. I'm lightly touching in the center, just right here where my thumb is. And then I can attach it up here at the top and down at the bottom. And just do it lightly at first. And then you can remove the shim and put it in a position where you can burnish that join. And that's our first join made. And I'll just set this aside for a moment. This is building 1, and the join is again going on the niche side here. So I'll get my piece of Tyvek that I've prepped, and this one again is getting held back 1/16 of an inch from the edge of that niche opening. And just make sure it's not too long. I'm holding it up 1/16 of an inch from the bottom, and it looks the right length. So I'm just going to go ahead and attach that in place 1/16 of an inch away from that opening and 1/16 of an inch up from the bottom. If yours is a little too long, just give it a little trim and then put some ink on a trimmed edge. Now this one I'll go ahead and burnish right now, and then I'll bring in the unit that has building 2 to 3. Now here's my unit 2 to 3. Here's my unit 1 with the niche, and it's going to go together in this orientation. There's the patio, like that. Of course, we want to put a shim in here. I'm just using my big one this time. I'm making sure that it's coming all the way to this front edge here. And then I'll make sure that everything is straight on my craft mat. And I won't put a lot of pressure this way, just enough so everything is staying in alignment. And I can remove the score tape backing from this side of my Tyvek and press it in place. Then once you have that pressed in place, you can go ahead and burnish it. And now we'll put this unit aside. So for all the other joins, we need to have a guideline at 9/16 of an inch because we won't have the niche opening to provide that guide for us. So I have a scrap of chipboard here that I'm going to cut to 9/16 inch wide. That is 1/16 more than a half an inch. And if you don't have a piece of scrap chipboard, you can use a piece of cardstock. But just make that cut at 9/16. And this piece needs to be at least 6.5 inches tall. So now I have my little helper piece, and I've marked it at as 9/16, so I'll remember what it's for. Now we'll start to build the second unit, and we'll start by joining buildings 4 to 5. So here is building 4, and here's the niches, and the niche side is down on my table. And this is building 5, and when I go to join this, I want to see one plain side here and one plain side on the left, so that it looks like this. That's how this join is going to go. And in order to space this out, we're going to take our helper piece, and I'm going to put it on the right side here. Just stand it up like this. And once it's standing up there, I'm going to draw along that line. I've checked on my Tyvek list, and building 4 to 5 is the 6 1/4 inch strip. So that's what I have here. And I'm going to go ahead and attach it to building 4. holding it up 1/16 of an inch from the bottom and aligning the edge with that line I just drew. Now I have this attached to building 4, and I'll remove the backing. And I'll stand these two pieces up, keeping them in that same orientation, and put my shim in, making sure that the shim is aligned here with the front. And then put these two buildings, line them up on my craft mat. I've got them on a line. And then I'll attach that Tyvek. Remember, don't put too much pressure, just gentle between holding these buildings in an upright position. Once I have that join made, I can get rid of the Tyvek. Get rid of the shim and then burnish down the Tyvek join. Once I have that burnished, I'm going to stand this unit up and turn it so the niches are facing towards the left. The unattached side of building 5 is facing towards me. And I'm going to bring in building 6. Here is building 6. I have the niches facing to the right so that all the niches are facing each other. And this is the right side that's facing out towards me. I'm going to draw my guideline right along that edge here by again putting it on the table and holding up the strip, the 9/16 inch strip, right along that edge. But do it flat on the table like this and you get the most accurate edge to the building. According to our chart, building 5 to 6 is a 5 1/4 inch piece. So I'll take a 5 1/4 inch piece and I'm going to hold that up here and attach it. If it's a little bit long, we're holding it up 1/16 of an inch from the bottom. Mine looks like it could be just a little bit long, so I'm going to cut it off and ink that edge, and then I'll attach the left side of the strip to building 6 and burnish it on. Now I'm going to align my 4-5 unit on a line on my mat and go ahead and put my shim in so that it is coming up to the front of the 5 unit. And then slide building 6 in so that everything is in a line. And when I'm happy, I'll remove the score tape backing and attach the piece of Tyvek on this side. And then I can remove my shim and burnish this join. So I'm going to take this unit and turn it around and then open up number 6 so all the buildings are in a row. This is building 4 and all the niches are on the right. I'm going to lay this down on my craft mat and use my 9/16 inch spacer on the edge here, on the right edge of building 4. And I'm going to align everything on a line on my craft mat. Then I'll bring in the 1, 2, 3 unit. And here's the 3 unit and the 2 unit. The niche is facing to the left. So this join is going to go in between the 3 and 4 unit. It's that middle, I think you can see the 3 and 4 buildings, that's where it's going. So I'm going to start by finding my piece of Tyvek that goes 3 to 4, and that is the 5 3/4 inch strip. and I'll attach this to building 4. So I have this strip attached to building 4, and I've removed the score tape backing. I'll stand it all up here all in a row. Don't forget the shim. And then get everything lined up. So when it's all lined up, I'm going to attach this over here to the building 3. Then I can remove my shim. And now you have to start being kind of careful about how you're holding this. And I'll just give it some support and do a good burnish on that join. Now we'll put this unit aside for a moment so we can join buildings 7 and 8. This is building 7. Here's the flat side. The niche side is facing away from me, and the hole is over here on my right. This is building 8. The niche side is facing to the right, and the join is going to go together right here. So I'm going to start by taking building 8, and I'm going to draw my placement line on the side here, on the right side of it. The 7 to 8 join is the 5 1/4 inch strip, and just to double check, here's my niche opening. This is the side I drew my line on, and I'll go ahead and attach that up to the line, keeping a 1/16 of an inch down here at the bottom. And now I'll stand up these buildings. I gave this a good burnish, and I've removed the score tape backing, and now I can stand up these 2 buildings, get my shim, and I'll line this up on a line on my craft mat, and I'll make that join. Then I'll remove my shim and burnish the join. So I've brought back in my main unit here. This is building 1 over here and building 6 here. I can see inside of the niche on building 1 and on building 6. Building 6 is facing to the left, and building 1 is facing towards me. We put building 7 and 8 together in this orientation. We're going to flip it so that 8 is coming next to 7 in this orientation, and then it just slides into this space right here. The join is between building 7 and building 6 right here. So this is the join right here between 7 and 6. So on building 7, on this right side is where I will draw my placement line. Before we join our last piece of Tyvek to building 7, I want you to note one thing, and that is that on building 6, we have the reindeer yard, which is coming down 1/8 of an inch from the bottom of the building. So when we put this strip on building 7, hold it up about 3/16 of an inch. It just needs to be more than 1/8, but 3/16 of an inch down here at the bottom, and then line it up on your line. I gave this strip a good burnish. I removed the score tape. I have this unit aligned on my craft mat, and I'll bring in my shim and put it between building 6 and 7 here. and then I can bring in the 7/8 unit and make this join between 6 and 7. And then you'll of course want to burnish that last join. So that's the North Pole Village with all the buildings joined together. When you open it up, sometimes it can be tricky to remember how to close it. So if you align buildings 4, 5, and 6 in a row back here, and then buildings 3 and 2 come in with 1 sticking out the front, and building 7 comes in this way with 8 coming out the front. And there's some gaps in here that will get filled in when we put the decorative paper on.